The Destiny Grimoire Anthology, Volume 2, Fallen Kingdoms. Part 3, Evolution. Chapter 6, Martyrdom. The Prison of Elders, the Reef. Didn't anyone tell you about the Prison of Elders? Weren't you on the strike team that killed that Archon priest, the one who escaped? Okay, all right. I'll tell the story about the Prison of Elders. The Awoken will tell you that a long time ago, the Queen conquered the House of Wolves. What they won't say, because they are very serious, important people, is that the House of Wolves did a lot of the job for them. After the Queen killed the wolf Kel, the Fallen started competing for the throne. One of the first battles was called the Eos Clash, and I wasn't anywhere near it. But I'm pretty sure I'm not making this up. A Fallen named Skolas wiped out one of his rivals in the Eos Clash, but the battle cost him so much he got to thinking, if the Reef killed my boss and gave me a chance at the throne, maybe I can use the Reef to kill all my rivals too. Pretty good, right? When they told me I had to be a vanguard, I went to ask some Fallen how I could get out of it, but they just told me to kill all my friends and then myself. Anyway, everyone involved in the Civil War started trying to play their rivals against each other, and the Awoken too. No one wanted to become so strong that they'd be a target. No one wanted to bleed their own forces dry doing someone else's dirty work. Cutthroat politics. And who's the best at cutthroat politics? That's right, Her Majesty, the Queen of the Reef. At the end of the wars, the Queen had played her way into the strongest position, and she had a collection of fallen nobility and servitors she thought might be useful to her. Of course she thought so. She just used them against each other and won absolute control of the Reef, the Belt, and the House of Wolves. She wasn't about to just toss away her playing pieces. She kept them frozen in her prison, the Prison of Elders, and she gave the keys to that prison to my buddy Varix, a Fallen who showed her loyalty. The Prison of Elders is a really curious thing. It holds creatures of enormous power, not just wolf nobility, all kinds of beasts, captured by corsair expeditions or lured in by the Queen. And it holds them well. The Queen, she can do things I don't understand. There's a power behind her, or in her, that values that prison. Cade 6, overheard in a tower lounge. Gift of Skolas, the Queen. For a while, the only lights were the eyes of the witches tending to the cell. The drone of the soul machines echoed through the prison. Gas billowed and ebbed into the shadows. She entered. They scurried to their points around her, the method of their arrangement precise. The Archon priest has been retired, my queen, said the witch to her right. Far from throne and audience, she moved without theater. Any word of Calyx Prime? We still sense something among the Anarchists. This voice came from behind her. She did not turn to acknowledge it. For the span of a brief silence, she moved between the sealed cells of the wolf nobility with her witches in constellation around her. More of your brother's crows have entered the cauldrons of Rhea. The witch directly before her spoke with a dry buzz. The 9 do not approve. She stopped a moment to study the sealed face of a cell. The cloud of her breath mingled with the slow exhalation of cryonics. Send them one of our prizes, something to commemorate our mutual victory. And which of your prisoners would you gift? If she paused to think, it was only for an instant. Send them Skolas. A lovely gesture. She cocked her head as if listening for a frozen heartbeat. And remind them this. The crows are mine. Fate of Skolas. The cell cracks open. Skolas, Wolf Kel, stumbles out and crashes to his knees. He tries to leap at the creature before him, the shape in the fog, to show it why it should be afraid. But the weight of grief smashes his legs against the cell. The rage upon him beats him to the floor. He falls on all 4 hands, his mighty armor thundering against itself. His house of wolves is enslaved. His people have been played, and it was his hubris, his would-be cunning that did it. While the other houses fought for their future on Earth, throwing themselves at the great machine, Skolas wasted his people in games of betrayal and ambition. Bitter pride through a bitter end. If Skolas were a Kel, he would ask his Archon to dock him. Either hisses in his mask, and it tastes cold. So cold. He looks up at the tiny hooded shape before him. The cell's mist is clearing. He can see. I believe that I am here, the creature says. To Skolas' ears, it has a strange voice, a strange accent. It speaks his language. I have a clear purpose. I cannot explain it. Forgive me. From beneath its hood, tiny fingers of shadow probe the air. Skolas rises up to smash it, to show his strength, because the alternative to violence is waiting for violence to come from a universe that has neither respect nor compassion. But he checks himself. His ambitions have brought him here, to this cell in this strange place. Only it's not so strange, is it? It's the hold of a catch. The Queen, he says to the thing. You work for the Queen. The 9 made me aware of my purpose, the creature says. If am here, then it is because the Queen sent you to the 9, and they wish you sent back. I will do no one else's work. Skolas has been a pawn long enough. A dreg told him, once, that she would play in a game as long as the game made sense. Nothing makes sense now, except the thought of Varric's throat shattering in his fists. Varric's the utterly disloyal. Varric's who should be welded into a ketch's prow atom by atom and left there as a figurehead to burn away. I am comfortable, the creature with the moving face says. A part of me wants to go somewhere warm. Now I will certainly tell you what you have been given. Skolas looks at the shrapnel gun in his hands. Skolas imagines what he would do with it if he could reach Varric's, or the brother of the Queen, or the alien Queen. Will it save anything they've lost? The world's docked from them? No. It cannot change the past. Only the future. Only the chance that his people might one day know themselves as more than pirates and scavengers. He should never have tried to be Kel of Wolves. He should have tried to be Kel of everything. Everything wants to kill his people. The machines and the militants and the green-eyed hive. The dead soldiers that hoard the great machine and come out crusading to wipe all hope away. The ship will be yours, the creature says. It hunches over itself as if burdened by its own shape. If you speak, you will be heard. I will go now. You are free. He tries to follow it. He fails. Somehow it is gone. He goes up to the throne room and sets his weapon down on the great seat. Skolas, Kel of Kells, goes to the ship's comm and looks for the sign of a servitor, for the way to plot a course. Fallen no more. Fallen 3. Ask them our name. Ask your masters what they call you. Ask the hollow, the hateful, the awoken with alien dreams insisted in them. Ask them our name. Fallen. They name us Fallen. Listen to me, wolf-born. Heed me, whirlwind scattered. I am the ghost of Cybele, the cunning claw of Iris, betrayed, chained, encrypted by the Queen, sent back from the darkness to save us all. The days of Kel and House end now. The calendar of slavery and abasement goes to the fire. We are a new calendar. We are an age of beginnings. Each of us is a day. I am the first, Kel of Kells, and I am the last, the dreg of dregs. I have conquered and been conquered. I am all of us, and all of us are I. In the shape of my life, I bind up all of us, all of our fury, all of our grief, all the lives we have wasted against each other. Together, we speak our new name. Remember the hope that brought us here. Remember the age before the whirlwind, when either ran free, when we ruled ourselves and our futures as kings. We wanted more than glimmer and glints and here always. Always remember that we came to the star in hope. And remember that we were denied. Remember the city of the death of children, the city that docks, which claimed for itself the great machine that might have saved us. Remember the city that even now sends its ghouls to murder our primes, starve our ether, and leave our young to die, gasping. Curse that city and its name. The curse is just. We gathered to take that city and save ourselves from extinction, saying to each other, we must be a storm, a whirlwind, a darkness, for it is said that only pain may be stolen from the dark, and we can let no more be stolen from us. We gather to fight against our twilight, king and devil and winter, all of us but us, the wolves. Why? What kept us from the gap? The wreath, the queen, the slavers who played us against each other and docked us into subservience. These sly, sterile unpeople. These mirages with cold minds twin to their own. These Charybdis butchers. They set us against each other. She played us. She made herself our Kel. We were fools, O children of the whirlwind. We fought each other when we most needed unity. I fought my rivals when I should have fought the queen, but I remember now, my dregs, my captains, my Kels. Each of us is all of us, and I remember, we are a people of resilience. I am the Kel of Kels, because I want what we have lost. I am the dreg of dregs, because I remember that a dreg will grow back what is lost to him. Ask them my name. Ask them with the shock blade and the shrapnel launcher. Ask them with the skiff and the ketch. Ask your masters by what right they master you, you who have been hardened by centuries of fight, you who inherit the whirlwind. Ask the queen for her throne. Ask them our name. Let them answer. You are Skolas, Kel of Kels. You are fallen no more. The Silent Fang. Commanded by the fearsome Drevis, Wolf Baroness, the Silent Fang are a unit of elite stealth warriors and assassins. Instrumental in Skolas' rise to Kelship among the wolves, the Silent Fang also menaced the Queen during the Reef War. It was Drevis and the Silent Fang who raised Amethyst, and then tricked the Queen's armada at the Battle of Iris. Though the Silent Fang suffered a serious blow when Drevis was finally thrown in the prison of elders after the siege of Pallas, they continued to threaten the Queen's forces until the war's end. The Hunt for Skolas. Excerpts from the Reef. Varix. My queen, my Kel. It is Skolas, they say. Petra. That's impossible. My lady, you assured us all that Skolas would never be seen again. Queen. Has it been confirmed? Varix. What does it matter? They always fear him, dead or alive. If not this Skolas, then another Kel. It is why the queen breakers rise and the prison breached. No one will call you Kel when a true heir makes a claim. Queen. Petra, report to my brother for any intel from the crows. Varix, see to your channels. Find the one who calls himself Skolas. Varix. Yes, of course, my queen, my Kel. Petra. Your grace, I will not relent until it is done. Queen. I know. That's why I've called you back. Mission. A Kel rising. Queen. So it is no lie. It is Skolas. Petra. Yes, my lady. A guardian got eyes on him in the Ishtar sink. I used ghost telemetry to confirm. Same pelt. Same awful voice. We drove him from Winter's lair. How did he... Queen. And you would have me consider this a success? What of Winter itself? Your report is unclear. Petra. You are correct, my lady. I would not call our mission a success. Skolas managed to win over, well, a substantial number of Winter soldiers have taken up the wolf banner. He calls himself Kell of Kells now. Silence. Petra. We found him once. We can do it again. I have a plan in place. As soon as the Guardian returns... Queen. Then go. Continue the hunt. Petra, you must not fail. Petra. I will not, my lady. Mission gone to ground. Petra paces back and forth before the console. At the controls, Varric efficiently moves through a decryption sequence. 4 arms interweave as his claws dance across the interface. She shakes her head. His cybernetic arms whine, almost imperceptibly, tiny, high-pitched noises as the servos manipulate the limbs. Petra. Well? Varric. No sign of Skolas, but the Silent Fang. He has unleashed the Fang. They hunt the devils. On Earth. Petra. The Fang on Earth. Devils. And kings? Nice work, Varric. Varric. Pleasure is all mine. Mission. The Silent Fang. Queen. Huh. I had not thought it would be so easy, my brother. The Silent Fang brought low. Aldrin. I do not see why this is funny. This Guardian may have dealt with them on Earth, but my crows say we still have much to fear. More of the Fang survive. Nearly every one of them made it out alive. Queen. I find no humor in any of this, brother. The Queen rises and descends to the bottom of the stair, turning in place to take in the chamber. Queen. So empty now. No wolves to sit at my feet. My guards. Silence. Queen. Talk to Petra. Set more bounties. Hunt down any of the Fang your crows can track. They may have escaped the prison of elders, but they will not escape my wrath. Mission. The ruling house. Varric stares up through the shielding surrounding the Vestian outpost, the thin filament of energy almost imperceptible, keeping in the heat and atmosphere within the confines of the hollowed-out ketch hull. His mandibles idly opened and closed as he contemplated the view. Varric, to himself, goes after Winter. Devils, kings, seeks power. Kings deny him. Kell of Kings hides well. Perhaps he will take back the great machine. Perhaps I chose the wrong side. It is not too late. Petra, overcome. Varric, crows are reporting Skolas is back in the Ishtar sink. They're all over the Vex networks. Varric. Yes, right away. Mission, Wolves Gambit. Aldrin. Nearly the whole fleet, Your Grace. Back in the Ishtar sink. Queen. He fails at his little prophecy, so he'll look to rule from Simixfell, now that Draxus is gone. Aldrin. I thought the same thing, but my crows say he's not there. We found more of his guard leading parties into the vault of glass. Queen. Interesting. Silence. Queen. Tell Petra I have changed my mind. Skolas is to be brought in alive. Mission. The Kell of Kells. Petra. So, any other fallen houses hiding he'll try to convert? Varric. He may seek to gather the exiles, but they will not follow. They follow none. No Kel, no Archon. Petra. What about this House of Rain, the prophecy you keep quoting? Varix. House Rain lost in Whirlwind. No survivors, but I keep their prophecies. You think many claim to be Kel of Kells, but none have. House Judgment closest thing to peace the fallen ever know. Petra. Maybe you are the Kel of Kells. Varix, distracted by screen. Looks like Skolas returns to Venus. Petra. I'll find the Guardian. Queen's Ransom. A bellow erupts from the barred grate at her feet. Bony fingers claw at the bars, their sharp points just inches from her toes. Prince Uldren chuckles. At the edge of the room, the Techians circle, their implants glowing faintly blue in the shadows. He's been amusing since Petra bring him. Varix injects, practically purring with glee. He say, Kel of Kells, over and over, and other such nonsense. Skolas bellows again. Varix strikes Skolas' grasping fingers with his staff. The queen's expression remains mild. She looks down her nose at the glowing eyes burning in the shadows beneath the grate. Skolas falls abruptly silent. Then a low, soft growl, almost like a whine, echoes from the cell below. Varix's mechanical hands click as he snaps them together in surprise. What's he? Begins Uldren. Varix interrupts with a burst of guttural clicks directed at the grate. The queen does not react. What did he say? He says, Varix hisses under his breath. He makes no sense, my queen. He speaks of light snuffer, dark binder. The queen aims her eyes at Skolas, her expression unchanged. I see. He will not say more. He does not need to. She turns towards the door. My queen, what of this one? Says Uldren. He awaits your sentence. You would not sentence a rabid dog, or a hive thrall, or a bomb. The queen's justice is wasted on one such as it. She paused. Varix? Yes, your grace. Skolas is yours. Let the children of light have their play with him. Ah, you are might and justice, my queen, my Kel. The Techians gather at the door as the queen approaches it. Prince Uldren holds it open with a small bow, and the queen touches his shoulder as she passes. Send a crow to Mercury, and another to our new friend in the tower. Skolas defeated. Skolas is dead. Varix sits carving at his piece of amethyst. His undocked arms are weaker, less precise, but it is a comfort to feel the crystal press hard into his palm. The knife slips. He cuts himself. Aye, he says. And of course, right then the door opens. Varix has no privacy. Varix wants no privacy. Varix lives to serve the queen. It's Petra Venj. She's masked against the ether air. The prince wants to speak, she says, and then, seeing him unmasked and bleeding, she chuckles. Petra depends on Varix for intelligence, and Varix, frustrated with her insane risk-taking and bravado, sometimes gives her tips meant to get her killed. Petra has figured this out. Petra and Varix know each other's agendas and each other's strengths, and to Varix, that's as close as any two people can get. Petra is smart. She sends guardians now, people who can die as much as they like. You slipped, she says. Varix holds up the amethyst in his bleeding hand. It's a wreathed gem. I wound myself, he says, to make this more beautiful. She stares into the gem with a distant, awoken eye. What does she see? Varix knows she has visions, and he knows those visions haunt her. drive her. The Awoken are twinned to powers that terrify Varix. He'd dock himself again before he'd let the Queen's witches near him, the witches who raised Petra. The unfairness of it makes him want to roar. Why does everyone else have this patronage? Why do the Hive have gods, and the Vex have sprawling time-bent minds, and the Cabal have reinforcements? Why do the Awoken whisper to the stars and listen for the whisper back, the voices from the Jovians, the song in the dark? Why do the Guardians get the great machine's blessing? Was it like that before the whirlwind? Were there fallen heroes, crowned and ghosts, who strode the battlefield, fearless and full of light? Why do they tell stories about reclaiming the lost glory of humanity, and no stories about the lost glory of Varix's people, the house of judgment that once kept codes of dignity and law? Why can't the fallen have that strength? But no, that strength is not for them, not for Varix. Just this bleeding, sad pragmatism. Just dreg strength, hanging on. The alternative is Skola's strength. Fighting together, raging against extinction. Look where that's gotten the species. The House of Devil's Prime is dead. The House of Winter's leadership devastated. The poor exiles trying to claw out some security against the Hive. In the last few years, the Fallen have lost so much, and everything is escalating around them. There are gods and powers converging on the system, old machines waking up, old bones whispering flatteries. They need a new way. Put your mask on, Petra says. The prince gets sullen if he's kept waiting. Not like us, Varix says, oh so mild. The wound on his hand will heal. His work in the prison of elders, setting up trial by combat, building an audience and a relationship with the Wreath's scavengers and armories, will bring him a little closer towards rebuilding the House of Judgment. Skolas's fury has guttered out. The Fallen may yet accept peaceful, lawful rule. They may yet survive. They'll hang on. We're very patient, yes? Petra looks down on him with pity and contempt and a strange fondness. He puts on his mask. Chapter 7. Adaptation. Within each fallen house is a secret collective of tinkerers, bioengineers, and scientists devoted to the evolution of their species. These devout engineers are known as splicers. The splicers' purpose is found in the unraveling of biological and mechanical truths. They tear into systems to reveal their value, either as tools for survival or as advancements worthy of their reverence and deification. Ghost. I thought Siva was technology, but it's like something alive, growing, out of control. Saladin. These devil splicers are using Siva, but they cannot control it. They are like children with a new toy. Ghost. How would the Fallen have learned more about Siva than the Iron Lords? Or, better yet, where did they learn? Sepix Reborn, Fallen 5. Frozen on the monitor was an image of Sepix Prime, the massive prime servitor that had been as a god to the House of Devils. Where once its plating was pristine, carefully maintained by the Archon priest and his acolytes, it was now splotched with red growths. The ether power emanations that once glowed strong and pure were obviously corrupted. Guardians had slain this god, and now it was reborn, through Siva. Varix of House Judgment sneered at the abomination. Golden Age project, yes? He clicked, turning to the crow. His field agent was a young, awoken woman. Technology of old Earth, learned from the great machine. The Elixni burbled to himself in mocking laughter and gestured with his lower hands. You do us proud. Go. Speak with other crows. Learn more about these devil splicers. She nodded, a small smile on her face, and left the chamber. Varix allowed himself a moment of silent contemplation, looking at the now closed door to the information suite. As always, it was lit only by the light of the dozen or so monitors in the room. The Fallen interlocked his upper hands. He bowed his head as he allowed himself to really feel the impact of that abomination on the screen. He never would have allowed anyone else to see this, but it hurt. Seeing the horror that was Sepix made anew. His people had fallen. Varric stared at the image of Sepix, and as he'd done before, he wondered what would have gone differently had he been there, among his people. Could he have stopped this before it happened? Could he have found them a better way? Must be a better way for Elixni, he clicked quietly. Must be a way to stop the fall. A golden bond. Dormant Siva, fallen. Long have we wandered in the blind prison of flesh, those old lives now a memory, transposed by another. The gift brings pain, yes, but godhood must come at a price. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0617. That which we were, we are no more. That which we are is undefined. We make our new selves. We need not machines, because we are machines. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0618. What is this complexity? Consume, enhance, replicate. The machine of 1,000 parts, fashioned by single mind. From where does such complexity arise? What does the creation of a mind require? In the long march of life's procession, order is created from disorder. The rise of complexity is not promised. Such things are not inevitable, and yet here I stand. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0619. Consume, enhance, replicate. Life requires death, requires life, all in an unending circle. The expenditure of countless generations, slouching blindly toward uncertain ends, each step forward a mere accident of chance. But this is different. This strange complexity requires only the will to wield it. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0620. Consume, enhance, replicate. Life's procession is written in the corpses of those who came before, but here the great chain breaks. Here we step forward, freed from that which has always bound us. Here we speak as gods. We are they who created themselves. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0621. We are they who created themselves out of themselves and died in the creation. No longer merely the god in the machine, but the machine in the god. Consume, enhance, replicate. Here we rise, made equal at last to that which we worship. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0622. Consume, enhance, replicate. To build a species requires epochs. Countless pairings and dyings, countless generations. The simplest creature requires geological spans of time to develop, but not machines. Machines are free from such constraints. It is not life that matters, but the building of complexity. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0623. Past is connected to the present by only two things: chain reaction and memory. Consume, enhance, replicate. But is not memory just chain reaction? Consume, enhance, replicate. These memories in my mind are not my own. They belong to a past version of myself, a different being entirely. Consume, enhance, replicate. One who could die. Consume, enhance, replicate. I am that no longer. Siva memory AK0624. It rises. I see clearly from its eyes, and breathe with its lungs, and stride with its legs, and kill with its hands. And yet it is not me. Consume, enhance, replicate. I am me. and yet I am it. Consume, enhance, replicate. This is a paradox. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0625. Consume, enhance, replicate. My thinking is clear now in ways it never was before. It is my mind that has changed, and yet it is not my mind, but another consciousness that is different from my own. Consume, enhance, replicate. I feel there is a choice to be made, and yet I have made no choice. Consume, enhance, replicate. The choice was made for me. Consume, enhance, replicate. Siva memory AK0626. Field reports from Rise of Iron. Mission: Quarantine. The Devil Splicer's machine priests have established ritual sites for the study, worship, and proliferation of Siva throughout the Plague Lands. It is unclear if these rituals have a specific purpose, or if they are simply another form of experimentation in the Devil Splicer's continuing efforts to understand and control Siva. Interfering with a Splicer ritual could bring about an aggressive response, especially if the priest's act of worship is ended swiftly and without mercy. Mission: Archon's Forge. The Archon's Forge is an ancient fallen rite of passage, twisted to utilize the Devil Splicer's latest discovery. Fallen seek to improve their station within the Splicer's quickly evolving caste by making offerings of dormant Siva to the Forge. Their worth is then tested in a trial by combat. The offering's quality, fused, enhanced, perfected, determines the severity of the challenge, and, in turn, the level of augmentation the petitioner will be granted should they survive. That a guardian would dare challenge the Forge with offerings of their own is an affront the Splicers will not take lightly. Mission: Wrath of the Machine. Intercepted fallen signal. Fellow houses, fellow Elixni, we have found the means to apotheosis, to become machines. Siva can make you strong, but we can show you how to wield it, to free yourself from the bonds of either. Find us in the wasteland and bring us an offering of Siva. In return, we will bring you to our chamber of perfection, and we will free you. Mission: Axis, Archon Prime. Axis is the fruit of the Devil Splicer's labor. A former Archon priest, Axis has submerged himself in Siva's apotheosis and emerged as Archon Prime. All that he was is gone. His dreams, his hopes, replaced by agency. He has shed his gods and his ether like skin, and in his uplifted state waits in his perfection complex for offerings of Siva from all fallen. House No More, Fallen 6. Theta 9-7 Red Delta. High priority message. Commander's Terminal. Eyes only. Twilight Protocol. Recon Groups A, J, and T returned to Tower Actual at 3 o'clock local time. No casualties. Light injuries across multiple members of J and T teams. Full debrief to follow. Breaking Mission Top Sheet Protocol, Commander. I want you to understand the scope of what we're looking at here. As the fire teams fanned out across the region, the Devils rushed to meet them. Our forces dealt with some post-Siva pockets of Splicer activity, and every once in a while, the Kings popped their heads up and scared the hell out of everyone. In other words, situation absolutely normal. That's a lie. The Fallen are abandoning the Cosmodrome. Hawk flyovers confirm. The House of Devils forces are simply not there anymore. They've been disorganized for the last few years, but there's never been a shortage of ground troops whenever we staged a significant sortie. Intel source Green Raven was right. And, for the moment, it's worth assuming their report on the House of Exiles, House of Winter, and House of Wolves are also accurate. We're fact-checking against independent fire team reports from the field. The kid all the SRL fans talk about, Marcus, he was in one of the fire teams out at the Cosmodrome. He pulled me aside and said it to me straight. The fallen houses are gone. The siege is broken. The stalemate we've had with the Elixni for what, 100 years? It's over. We won. Commander, I'm not even sure they're flying the banners anymore. The teams found huge mounds of burnt cloth and armor, ceremonial piles, and several of the most hardcore fallen holdouts. What's changed? Where have the fallen gone? Why have they burned their banners? I'm drawing up a plan to coordinate forces from the Queen's Wrath, Fellwinter Peak, the Warlock Orders, and more non-traditional outfits to follow up on these reports. I believe your wisdom will guide us through the trials ahead. Sloane. House of Dusk. The betrayer prince spoke the words of the last Kell, and the fallen burned their banners. A dreg watched his people die in piles of red, blue, and green. The last of the Elixni were scraps of cloth, alight in bright tongues of flame. Rain and scar and stone were dust. The kings bent the knee. The exiles knew nothing but hate. Too many devils rejected the way of either to embrace the hateful red cloud that twisted and shaped them. The wolves were lost with their Kell Queen. Winter was as silent as snow. There was no judgment. The dreg remembered the stories of the Elixni, how proud his people had been eons ago. They explored the stars. Their ketches landed on many worlds and claimed them for their own. They built cities that shone in the glow of a dozen suns. Then the great machine came. It offered everything, and it took more. It disappeared in a whirlwind, and it left despair and ashes. The shining cities fell. His people had followed the great machine across the universe, beseeching it to see them once more. They had tried again and again to take it from its hateful new children, but it would not speak to them. Cold ether hissed where once there had been warmth. Now the banners were burning. The dreg looked up at the night sky, brilliant with stars, but saw only the space between. It was beautiful. The fallen would have no more Kells. Only the lowest of the low could lead them. They would scavenge and steal and claim the scraps that were their due. Their banners would fly the symbol of the space between. There was no light for the Elixni, only dusk. Baron of Shanks. Type, Ghost. Leviathan Athena EM Network Sync 00012. Parties 1. Fallen type, Personal log. Associations: Emperor Callus, Leviathan, Menagerie, Fallen, Secris, Shadow of Callus. It is the eve of our mission to end the life of Dominus Gaul. The shadows are ready. But my Kell Callus, ever mindful, demands one more record for posterity. This is a story I have told him over and over. He has cried laughing at it. I do not share his love of it, but he is my Kell, so I shall tell it one last time. Before I was a shadow of Callus, I called myself Baron. Of what? Of nothing, really. I am not special among my people. My generation was born of the whirlwind. We are, all of us, misers. And misers learn very quickly to show strength or die. Even false strength is better than nothing. So I was a baron of Shanks. My specialty was and is in the design and armament of Shanks. My house and I made our den at the edge of the system. We hoped to be as far from the war against humanity as possible. Found us, anyway. Or rather, he did. The Saint, the violent king of humanity's last city, the fiercest of all those called Titan, along with 5 other lights. They attacked our settlement in the night and razed it in a matter of hours. The Saint was on what his people call a crusade. He hunted all Elixni across the system, and today, it was our turn. By the time I was awake, I was one of the last few left. By the time I had activated the defense schemata hidden across our encampment, I was the only one. I watched from the shadows in my stealth scheme as my army of Shanks tore 5 lights apart. And when, to my amazement, the lights stood up, I set my shanks to an interminable setting. For as long as the light stood, my shanks would not stop firing. Their arc cannons sang into the night. I was a miser, but I built my shanks well. That left only the saint, and somehow he could smell me. He knew something or someone guided the shanks. He hunted me, and I ran until we reached my final refuge, a bunker I constructed as a last resort. Not for the first time in my life. My people were all dead. I had nothing left to lose. I made certain to wait for the furious amethyst divider on his helmet to appear in the distance before I entered the bunker. I wanted him to follow me, and he did, along with his shank, through a battery of web grenades and proximity charges. He finally cornered me inside the bunker, shining armor dented and blackened. The divider on his helm glowed an angry purple, the light around him a sizzling void. Up close, the saint was a freakish thing. Its grace bellied its size. It hurtled forward with the armor of a walker and the speed of an arc bolt. Even its movements had movements. I scrambled backwards, tilting my head back to avoid a slash from his boiling void shield. I could hear my own breath as the conjured metal sizzled just past my throat and came back around for another slice as it missed. I ducked. He knew I would, and his knee found my face, cracking the heads-up display in my helm and setting me reeling back. 3 strikes in the space it took me to process a single one. My odds to finish this fight were poor, but I had him. As I stumbled back, bleeding from several open wounds in my face under the helm, I keyed a control on my waist rig. A barrier blurred to life between us as the blade of the saint's shield cracked against the space in front of my eyes and bounced back with a ringing clang. I blinked and stepped back. He stopped, too, to survey his surroundings. He was stuck. The barrier kept him from advancing, and the switch on my belt had shut and locked the plasteel doors behind him. I sat back, exhausted, ether and blood dribbling from my face beneath the helmet. Gunfire rang out in the distance. We stared at each other across the light of the barrier. In those days, I spoke only the language of my people, but I had once stolen a glossator from House Judgment in the event that diplomacy with our earthborn successors was necessary. I wish I had had the chance to use it before the killing began. I spoke anyway. This is an approximation of what was said, recounted from memory and edited for clarity. The glossator is imperfect. Your comrades are still fighting to stand. I did not know the light could bring you back from the brink. I had heard rumors from other houses. I had not believed them. The saint's boiling shield dissolved into the air. He stared at me with the expressionless eyes of his helmet. It is the quintessential gift of the light. Your people held it before. What did the traveler gift you? Many things. I lied. I had no idea. Secrets lost to time, hidden in half-truths. He took a moment to think. What do you hope to accomplish here? He asked after a moment. I have questions, I replied. What would you like to know? The Battle of 6 Fronts, the sieges at Boyle Pass, the breaking of the weapons of rain. You have done so much. So I've been told. Everyone asks about those days. What do they ask? They ask how I did it. I laughed. It made me bleed, and I winced. That is not what I would ask. What would you ask? Why? I would ask why. The expressionless plasteel face stared down at me. What gave you the right? I said. If you saw what your people have done on my world, you would know, he replied. The great machine. Do you commune with it? I asked. To this, he did not respond. Reality bent with a warbling shriek, and his shield reappeared in his hand. He started to look for a way out, scanning the corners of the room and the barrier projection system. I think I can kill you, I said as I watched him. The saint said nothing and continued her survey of the chamber. Your shank came in here with you. It is hidden now, but I saw it. It is a key to your light, is it not? There are enough explosives under us to tear a walker apart. Try it, he said, looking at the ceiling. Kill us both. You'll do my work for me. My friends will be safe. He stopped. He had found no way out. We stared at each other across the barrier. What are you waiting for? He asked. I thought about it, and found I could not do it, given the choice. Out of fear? Indignation? Perhaps both. I thought I had nothing to lose. I was wrong. Do you think, I said slowly, that if I allowed you to live, the great machine would bless us again? The saint did not respond. It loves you, does it not? The gunfire of my shanks echoed faintly outside. I keyed a switch on my waist rig and the barrier came down. The doors unlocked. Outside, my shanks ceased firing. The saint stared down at me through the dented, blackened helm. He left. I assume he convinced his friends to leave too. I keep watch on him through the vast Cabal battle net. He has continued to lead many successful campaigns against my people. Archive note, Secrus, Baron of Shanks, perished in the assassination attempt on Dominus Gaul. Chapter 8, Assimilation. Death to Kells. What is a Kell to a spider? Avrock knew Kells. He had never spoken to one, had never ever been on the same battlefield as one, but as a twice-docked dreg of House Kings, oh, how he knew Kells. Kells were stronger, faster, smarter. In other words, they had better resources, ate better, slept safer, lived longer. They were like guardians in that way. Avrock had had enough of both. He stopped bringing all his salvage to his captain. They didn't notice. And if they did, it's not like they could have cut his ether rations any more without killing him. Nothing left to lose. He built his ship piece by piece in a gully far away from prying eyes. When the awoken prince arrived, he knew a distraction when he saw one. While the Kell mocked his newest prisoner, Avrock made his escape. He flew his ship to the tangled shore. Starving and weak, he stood before the one they called the Spider, offered his ship as a sign of his goodwill. Spider rubbed his chin, an alien gesture. What is it called? Your ship. Avrock lifted his chin, looked Spider directly in the eyes. Death to Kells. Spider hired him on the spot. Either doctor. Control the supply. The Spider. Here is my offer. The Spider folds both set of arms over his thorax, leans back in his throne. For the martially inclined, bodyguards, enforcers, and such, I will provide 1 kilogram of either for 1 day's work. By day, I mean half of 1 30-hour cycle. That's the schedule I keep. If you suffer an injury in my service, you will still be paid for your days of recovery. Sibilant murmurs of surprise echo around the Spider's chamber. The dregs and vandals gathered before him are trying to figure out the catch. Spider allows himself a luxuriant smile. For those who prefer a more freelance lifestyle, you will find me an enthusiastic collector of salvage and secrets. My prices are posted on the local network. In the last 40 orbits, I have changed them twice. He pauses to let the elixir tune into his network, let the prices sink in. The hisses of joy are even louder this time. You are used to competing for the favors of your Kell. Let me make one thing clear. I am no Kell, and I do not waste my favor on you. Honor your side of the deal, and I shall honor mine. No more, no less. Now, Spider claps his hands, relishing the thoroughly human usefulness of the gesture. Get to work. Right side of wrong. Where do you stand? This may be the best deal Spider has ever made, and that, he reminds himself, is saying a lot. In exchange for facilitating the deaths of his enemies, Spider receives death for some other enemies. It's almost embarrassing. He would have provided the Baron's location for free if they had pressed him on it. But why offer anything for free? And any guardian had to admit, the Barons were much, much worse for the shore than the humble Spider. When he had his territory back, everyone would benefit. Profit all around. All in all, he feels delightfully magnanimous. Yes, this will be a wonderful friendship indeed. An evolution of faith. Find your honor not in your station, nor the words and gifts of those who seek control, but in yourself, in your actions, deeds, and soul. To look anywhere else is a lie. An excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of Writings and Observations from the Tangled Shore, a Fallen Text. Fickrell was an Archon. Then Fickrell took a fall, beaten, docked, and banished for heresies against Elixni faith. He should have died, alone and starved of precious ether. He did not. Instead, he found kin in the form of 7 scorned. With them, he found purpose and power. As their legend grew, he found believers and knew truth. His banishment was not penance. It was reward. For his convictions, for his courage. Fickrell, the crazed fanatic. Fickrell, the heretic Archon who spoke against the very faith he once held dear. Scorned and forgotten, but only for so long. Fickrell was a dreg. Before his banishment, before his clarity of purpose, Fickrell was a celebrated leader of fallen faith and a savior to those who embraced his teachings. Archons had long been elevated in fallen society, but their stature grew, and their role shifted following the whirlwind, as desperation took hold and the last of the fallen raced across the stars in search of salvation. Their dependence on machines evolved into a deep-rooted need, their weapons to fight, their ships to fly, their servitors to survive. That need became worship. That worship became faith. And the Archons, those who oversaw the care and consecration of the servitors, were looked upon to provide hope through their words, teachings, and interpretations of the machine's wants, needs, desires. But Fickrell saw another path, one that would later be mimicked and twisted by the techno-deviant splicers in the plague lands of Earth, while he and his explore their own darker interpretations of faith. Fickrell is a fanatic, scorned and abandoned. Fickrell is all who strive to regain strength of self and purpose. He is a survivor. He is the outcast priest of the broken plains, and his sermon is death and all the glory that follows. In Fickrell's eyes, and those of the outcasts who rallied to his philosophies, machines were not superior. They were not gods. They were tools, instruments to be mastered and controlled and manipulated in service of Elixni pride. None should grovel for ether. None should have their honor bound to the whims of manufactured deities. But the evolution of Fickrell's faith did not end there. If the machines, the very things that had regulated the whole of their existence, were tools, why not life itself? Why not death? There are many tales of the time between Fickrell's fall and his rise again as spiritual leader of the scorned barons, his struggle to find strength as a battered dreg, his journeys across the system to challenge his faith, his joining with the other outcasts who were scorned, and his eventual union with his father. The only thing that matters, however, when confronting the dangers of Fickrell is this: he is a creature of faith. His faith is the antithesis of all who stand in the light. That faith has raised an army. That army will baptize all who challenge its purpose in an unending sea of death. They will never stop. They will never give in, because they know they are right, and everything you stand for is wrong. A gift of madness. The song of the grinding stone calls like pained sirens, shrill and uneven. Its melody is a warning, yet still they come. Adventurers, bounty hunters, scoundrels, and unwanted. Here they find purpose, or hide from those worlds beyond, those polite lands which heroes strive to reclaim. There is no reclamation here. The shore is ever wild, and so shall it remain. Ever the broken land where madness dwells and violence reigns. An excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of writings and observations from the tangled shore, a fallen text. The questions no one asks. Was the bomber always mad, or was he driven to it? Was the madness a gift or a curse? Did the struggle for survival outside the structure and ritual of the house system crack his mind? The things he'd seen? Done? The shore asks much of those who call it home. Most simply find their end through the harsh will of these harsh lands, or by the hand of the hardened agents who stalk its fractured expanse. Bandits, cutthroats, cannibals, awoken patrols, guardian heroes. There are a billion ways to die among the jagged wilds of the tangled shore. To challenge those odds is no small feat. To do so while maintaining self, rarer still. However, isn't it also possible the bomber was this all along? Mad, deranged, eager to inflict destruction, lustful for the chaos and death to follow. The seeding of the accretion fields, the bombing of the origin libraries. Canix's handiwork has been linked to numerous tragedies, both as a rogue enemy of the reef and in league with his scorned brothers and sisters with whom he grew strong, with whom he found the purpose he once lacked. These points, an examination on the birth of madness, I raise to address a lingering concern. Seek the awoken libraries. Speak to cryptarchs with knowledge of the reef, the shore. Scour the records of the bomber's deeds. Feel the pain of those who suffered the fire of his devastation. Remember the fields. Weep at the unimaginable loss when the libraries fell. Allow yourself the comfort of knowing the sinister creature is now dead and gone by guardian hand. But linger on victory's pride for only a short while, because the truth I seek to tell has yet to be revealed. And it is this. The mad bomber is dead. Canix is no more. Yet the shore remains ever untamed. Despite valiant effort, despite your incredible strength. And if the shore remains tangled, its edges ever shifting, ever dire, then who else may it drive to madness? First, long-lost survivors of the fabled Golden Age, then stray awoken and discarded fallen. Maybe next, the warriors of the light, guardians. After all, more will surely come. And with more, however righteous you may be, the odds shift further in the shore's favor, in the favor of madness. And if not another, guardian, why not you? By thy tongue be damned. Even here, the whispers persist, faint but present. Excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of writings and observations from the tangled shore, a fallen text. A dreg fell, left to die, a forgotten pirate set on a path toward salvation. His crew had raided the moon looking for either. They found only death, and then he was alone. Hirax the small, Hirax the timid, the weak, was lost at the depths of the hellmouth. A solitary scavenger down among the hollows where dead things dwell. How he survived is a story untold, an impossible tale known only to Hirax himself. And that secret is his strength. For poor, weak, pathetic Hirax came out of that hell as something other, Still fallen, still alone, but changed by all he'd seen and learned. His mind opened, set adrift through the wonders of all the nightmares he had never imagined. Some say he spent his time hidden in the shadows of that cruel land, scouring the mysteries of the world's grave. Others suggest he peered into a hateful shrine and found truth in the unutterable horrors whispered from the abyss. Truth is, only Hirax knows. Truth as simple as it is puzzling. Yes, he did. Scour the grave, hear the whispers. Only then could all that followed transpire. For a lowly dreg to rise from their docking to stand as a baron is rare enough, but that a fallen of any stature could crack the layers of understanding that barricade the known universe from the ascendant plane is more than improbable. It was impossible. Until it wasn't. For Hirax succeeded where so few have. He crafted his own throne world and began a monstrous quest to expand his knowledge, etching its harshest truths upon his enemies. And his work has progressed and unchecked. It is his name the children do not speak when sharing tales of the haunting of Nemesis. It is his blood that paladins and corsairs alike wish to spill for the slaughter at Gaspra. Hirax the Twisted. Hirax Ascendant. The mind-bender whose tongue is a weapon, whose experiments seek to unravel sanity and reshape imagination that his subjects may become other, tools of his vile bidding. And so, the warning spread. When the fallen who speaks in the language of the damned calls, do your best not to listen, for once his words take hold, your will shall fade, replaced by his antithesis. And then, like that poor, weak, fallen dreg, you too will know darkness. You too will be alone. Riddled with lies. Trust is your shield. Trust is your weakness. In the end, we all fall to betrayal. Excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of Writing and Observations from the Tangled Shore of Fallen Text. A simple riddle for you to consider. Only truth can conquer lies. But what is truth, and in whose eyes? What then of the butcher of Bamberga? What then of the psych-horde slayer? The terminus of the Grey Legion? The sliver of the shadowed veil? The bandit of Old Bassa? The dire sirens of Valiant's reprieve? What then of so many who are one, a single scourge, responsible for many varied tragedies? The trickster, the liar, silver-tongued Arascus, the wit. She who bartered with a spider and nearly cost him his life. She who swindled a dozen bounty hunters that she alone may profit. So many tales of Arascus' sleight of hand and tongue and mind. The enemy who has won battles where no battle was fought, who has killed more rivals than have ever risen to her challenge. What is known and unknown, none can say, and the sly prankster would have it no other way. Of all the barons marked by scorn, it is Arascus to fear, for her greatest weapon is the disillusion of truth. She will give you certainty, only to reshuffle the deck. She will grant you your desire, only to reveal it is truly regret. If this realm can allow for gods, then she may be the first among devils, unknowable, unpure. Her tongue will cut you down long before your body falls. If you don't believe, if you find yourself questioning the depths of her deceit, ask yourself a simple question. Did you kill her? And if you did she die? If the answer is yes, her trap is set. If your answer is, it's okay, you don't have to say it. Maybe you will survive out among these wild shores longer than most, though maybe not as long as you'd like. Anguish, tenfold. Be weary of those who would do harm, yourself included. Mind that you do not become undone. For once infliction is tinged with joy, you are not but a beast. And we are not more than that. Do we not strive for better? Excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of Writings and Observations from the Tangled Shore of Fallen Text. It was Rexus Vaughn who saw to the final days of the House of Wolves. With cold hatred he hunted and slaughtered their servitors until none remained, and thus a rabid house did fall. But Rexus Vaughn's rage was not sated, as the wolves alone were not the architects of his fury. All fallen who clung to the ritual of house politics were his enemy, total and complete. It is told that he was starved as a young dreg. He watched in agony as others grew strong while he and his closest brothers and sisters were kept low. They were unworthy, pathetic, unwanted. But Rexus was ever aware. He saw the lie of the Archon's worship, how servitors were revered upon a pedestal of godhood as a means to control the masses. Maybe there was a time when the fallen theology was one with greater concerns. No more. The house is fractured, at war with one another. Old graces long since neglected in favor of a more desperate purpose: survival. While cast low, Rexus found strength in his growing hatred. Only when he found common disdain among those twisted outcasts who would call themselves scorned, who wore their hated derision as a badge of honor, did Rexus also find an outlet for his anger. His new brothers and sisters saw great value in his unchecked aggression. They were all a bit mad in their own right, all a bit twisted. But where others slipped towards insanity, Rexus's mind and intent were clear. The agony of a terrible death was his aim, the target of his wickedness, the very servitors he had been denied, the very machines that sustained the fallen. He would tear and slice and rend their metal until their hissing deaths rang across the shore, the reef, the entire system. He would make all who do not stand with the scorned barons feel the anguish he once felt, tenfold. And he would do so gleefully, watching the life drain from their eyes. A blind eye toward tomorrow. They who draw mustn't always draw first, for it is not speed that kills, but the eye, keen and sharp. So, then, do not feel death. See it, know it, and it shall manifest upon the trigger's embrace. An excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of Writings and Observations from the Tangled Shore of Fallen Text. Purra, the phantom. Purra, the blind. The fallen baron with the all-seeing eye and the crack shot. The awoken link him to the legend, the ghost of Hellrise Canyon, believing it was Purra, and Purra alone, who haunted the winding depths, picking off intruders and holding off corsair raiding parties as his fellow barons planned their violent reign in the maze of caverns near the canyon's heart. He was unseen during the wolves' uprising, but many credit him with the assassination of the Queen's palace guard. None can verify, but each fell to a single shot, clean, precise, fatal. But how can a blind pirate who had been discarded and scorned by his house become the deadliest shot this side of Mars? This is where the Baron's true strength hides. They are each devil worthy of your hate, but together they are so much more. Not simply devils, but hell itself. Manifest, angry, and aggressive. Rumors and legend merge to tell one of the machinist's expert hand, the rifleman's cybernetic eye, and a link between his sight and the tracking systems on his rifle. What he sees, he hits. What he hits, he kills. There is evidence of fallen giving themselves to technology, becoming other, becoming more, as they marry their physical selves to enslaved mechanics. The mercenary Taniks is one example. More machine than fallen now, an abomination in the eyes of traditional fallen belief. The Splicers and their augmentation through Siva, a twisted experiment brought low by the mighty hand of the heroes of iron. Is Purra any different? The Barons and Taniks and the Splicers are each and all individual dangers, driven by their own ambition. They are more likely to wage war with one another than see their commonality. Yet are they not of a kind? Are they not evidence of something greater wending its way through the fallen's dying culture? Are they not the warning signs of a new, terrible evolution? One can only wonder and hope these horrid amalgamations of life and technology are simply outliers and not a promise of tomorrows yet to come. The Ragged Valley Sprint. Many are lost to the shore's wayward ebb and flow. The shifting mass gives and takes, pulls and tears, the ground beneath ever uncertain, so tread carefully, as other dangers distract. But death lingers, its grip loose but present, waiting to take hold, waiting to embrace all who walk these tangled lands. An excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of writings and observations from the tangled shore, a fallen text. The Ragged Valley is long and harsh and no valley at all, not by traditional definition. Its hollow length runs between a series of lashed asteroids on the shore's far western edge. They call it a valley to be poetic, but in truth it is simply the chaotic space between massive rocks that scrap and smash into one another in a violent dance. The distances from mass to mass ebb and flow without warning, a constant, deadly repositioning of the landscape. That ever-changing hollow is the valley. Only the mad and desperate would dare run its length, with one exception. Yavix, the writer. The reason she made the run changes with the telling. You know she is neither mad nor desperate, what with her skills on a pike and killer determination. But the run itself, it's a legend as awe-inspiring as any Guardian's, save the fact Yavix is a wicked beast and better off dead. The story goes, she was running either, or making off with lost Golden Age tech. Some say Clovis Bray science. Others tell it was drivers from a forgotten war mind. Or maybe she just dropped a Guardian and was running full throttle from a fire team set on revenge. A common theme this far out. Or was it pride? Did a captain or a Kell or an Archon challenge her ability to ride? Did Fickrell? After all, their relationship is complicated. None of that matters. Not to me. Each version of the start is as interesting as the next. But the run itself? Her ride through the gnashing jaws of death? Most Guardians who have heard it dismiss it, don't want to give credit to one so infamous. The scorned Baron with the blood on her hands, the loot in tow, and her burners set to top speed. But she deserves it. Don't believe me? Ask Marcus Wren. He wasn't there that day, but he'd heard tell and couldn't believe. So he made the run himself. 4 goes. No dice. 1 resurrection. 4 sparrows busted to rubble. Marcus Wren, the Sparrow Racing League champion and hero to speed junkies and race hounds citywide, couldn't sprint that valley. Too random, he says. Too chaotic. Can't read the rock 1 minute to the next. Can't read the angles. But he tried again, and on the 5th go, he scraped through a narrow as the collision hit. He'd made it. The impossible was possible, though he refused to admit Yavix could have done the same. Not that it mattered. That Wren had come out alive proved it could be done, and if it could, why not Yavix? Not that Yavix ever cared for validation. Not yours, not Wren's, not any Guardian's, not any Fallen's, not anyone's. She took pride in recognition from her brother and sister Barons, and no others. Truth tinkered. Out here, they who craft their own fate see tomorrow, while they who depend on faith rarely make it through today. Excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of writings and observations from the tangled shore of fallen text. If you had not heard of the machinist before, know that others had. While her crimes may not live in infamy in the hearts of city dwellers, the reef and its awoken know all too well her long reign of terror. Elicris, the bandit, they call her. Elicris, the scourge, the scorned machinist, tinker lord of a houseless crew. But should those names be new to your ears, there are others you trust who have felt the pain of her vile campaign. Ask your Auroch of the machinist's deeds. Ask him about the siege of Aran, the hijacked ships, its stolen contents, and its guardian protectors lost or captured at the hands of the scorned. Speak to your vanguard of the soulless descent. More guardians felled, and an armory stripped of its cash. The lowly dreg who challenged tradition only to be cast aside. The lowly dreg who found her own strength in a troubling bond with forsaken kin. She grew strong as an outcast, grew mean, then found her purpose with the guidance of a preacher of sorts and a new, more driven crew. Now then, the questions you must ask yourself. Had you known of the Baron's deeds? Had you heard tell of the machinist's crimes? Could you have changed the path tread from there to here? From yesterday to today? Better yet, your vanguard, your factions, your friends and allies. What all have they kept from you? If they spoke not of the scorned barons, if they issued no warning, is it because they simply did not see the full scale of the danger? Were they too distracted by wars, within wars, an interest of their own to issue the guidance needed for you to see the shore for the threat it has always been? Perhaps given guidance that may well have saved countless lives? Or at least one life in particular? A scorned path. Surviving is a whole lot easier when your enemies are dead. Excerpt from C.C. Lagrange's translations of writings and observations from the tangled shore of fallen text. It was Elicris, the machinist, who'd begun hoarding the servitors, and Rexus, the hangman, who slaughtered them at every turn. Two allies driven by opposing forces, one science and the unmaking of faith, the other rage and its relentless push to destroy. There had long been tension between the two, as Rexus had, more than once, slipped into the machinist's workshop to inflict himself on the servitors caged there. Fickrel, the fanatic, their spiritual leader and one-time Archon priest, watched patiently as their rivalry grew. He saw strength in their ire. He saw fire and fury, but also more, a new path forward, one that could join their passions and drive them further, a whole stronger than its warring parts. Fickrel waited, biding time as tensions rose and threatened to splinter the Baron's loyalties. Only when Elicris could take no more, on a night when she caught the hangman, prepared to slaughter her latest haul of lesser servitors, did Fickrel step in. Fickrel motioned to Elicris and said, "Bring me a servitor." As Rexus hissed with anticipation, she hesitated, but Fickrel was patient. "Where is your trust?" Elicris released the servitor from its bondage. Fickrel motioned the servitor closer, then turned to Elicris. "You have gathered many, machinist. Hundreds, maybe more. Our own supply, our life force fed by slaved mechanics." Elicris nodded to the servitor as it inched closer to the Archon's open arms, welcoming the once revered orb as one would a child. The other barons began to bark, a rhythmic warrior's chant. "For all the value in your work, it is not enough to feed ourselves." Fickrel hugged the servitor. There was a tenderness to the embrace, a sorrow. "We must also starve our enemies, as you were once starved." With a blur, Fickrel's lower arms unsheathed and triggered a pair of polished, sparking shock blades. As were we all. The servitor, still held with the clutches of the Archon's powerful upper arms, cried a shrill, digital retch. Pain mixed with confusion as the blades carved its outer shell and plunged deep into the core of its systems. Either hissed and sprayed. Fickrel released the machine's silent shell, and it clanged lifeless to the ground. He turned to Elicris. "Do you see?" Elicris smiled. She was ever the brightest among them, though her focus could lose clarity when she became frenzied. The barons had long been trouble for the awoken and fallen of the reef, But that trouble had been limited to hit-and-run tactics. What Fickrell had just presented was a new way. Fickrell stepped to Rexus. "Do you see?" The brute barked in response. "Kill them all!" Fickrell laughed. "Not all, hangman. Just the ones we do not need." The barons cheered as Fickrell continued. "Every servitor, any servitor, bound to a house is now a target, until none remain but those upon whom we feed." Cade 6 reminisces. Cade 6 reminisces. Fallen. Okay. I'll tell the story about that one Fallen. It didn't happen like that. We didn't, do anything actively. No handshake, no icy stare of grudging mutual respect. I don't even know which hand you would shake. Do they shake hands? It must be complicated. Anyway, it was like this. I was on the moon. I cracked a hive structure near Mare Imbrium looking for a shrine, and they just swarmed. Ranks and ranks and ranks of thrall pouring out between the columns. But the columns were knights, and all the shadows behind them rose up hissing sorcery. Of course I ran. I had a line of egress, and while yes, it was full of thrall, I had a backup too. I went upslope, took cover in the shadow of a crashed phaeton, emptied my machine gun, ducked down to reload, and saw her at the other end of the hull, killing thrall. A fallen in exile colors, bannered in the marks of a baron, though the flags were claw-torn and stained with hive ash. She was alone. I think she must have lost her crew. I didn't really have time to shoot her, and she didn't really have time to shoot me, so we just went back to killing hive. Knights pushed me out into the open and back up the range to a high stone saddle in the shadow of an old interferometry array. It was good ground, so she came up there too. For a while, we just killed things, which is hard to make interesting in a story, so I'll pass it over. At the end, the wizards came. I climbed the array to get an angle on them, and she fell back to the base of the antenna, where she broke her swords off in a night. I saw that happen, and I don't know if I can tell you how I felt. She was another living thing with a mind I could understand, and she hadn't howled at me or tried to eat my ghost. I cheered when the night went down. When I came down, empty on all guns, she was slumped against a bulkhead staring at me with all her tiny black eyes, either leaking out of her like smoke. The night hadn't died easily. Downslope, the last wizard moved like fire behind another line of thrall. I looked at her and wondered how many innocent human lives she'd ended on those broken blades. She did the strangest thing then. Took the last shock pistol from her bandolier and threw it between us, as if to offer it. When I went to pick it up, she tried to knife me, but she was slow. And when I broke her arms and opened her throat, she didn't seem surprised. To this day, I wonder if she hated me, or wanted to make me kill her, or just felt she could spare me the choice. I did kill a few thrall with that pistol. Miss Rex. Book, The Dreaming City. The Vandal stoops as he exits the Goliath. All of his arms are bound behind his back, so he cannot shield his eyes from the bright sun. A breeze stirs his cloak. There is a cliff behind him and lush gardens ahead. His jailer would not grant him the honor of a quick death, so she must intend to torture him. She thinks he will yield like the flesh lovers from House Judgment. She is wrong. Whatever indignities she can muster are nothing compared to what he deserves. With his chin held high, he imagines shucking off his armor and laying all four of his arms in his captain's hands. His captain is his mother, and she will not dock him with a scythe. She will twist and tear his arms from his body like she is shucking a fine, fat crab for dinner, and he will be glad of the slow, sick cracks and crunches of his bones. He will be glad of the shame. Let him go limbless for the rest of his wasted life. Let the ether thirst shrivel him up like a Yavirsi fig. What do you think? His jailer asks in a language he cannot understand. She steps up beside him and claps a hand on his shoulder. He flinches. She is nearly as tall as he is, and for a creature with no claws, her grip is strong and sure. Together they contemplate the gardens. It's all a bit much for my taste, she admits, as he sneaks a furtive look at her. Her bow is unstrung. There is only one arrow in her quiver. She is stupid. He whirls, trips her, and sprints for the cliff. She swears, recovers, and lunges after him. As he pitches himself off the edge, he thinks of his mother's shame and prays that she forgets him. Better that she never had a son than a weakling so easily captured by the enemy. It is his bad luck that she catches his foot with one hand. His helmet slams into the rocky cliffside. A piece of his rebreather cracks off and disappears into the mist far below. He flails, but he cannot drag her down with him. Somehow, she hauls him in like a fish. As soon as she has him on solid ground, she binds his ankles with a string of her bow. "All right," she says, catching her breath. "All right." She chuckles, pats his shoulder fondly, and then pulls him upright like a sack of sockets. She takes a step back, brushing off her hands against the seat of her trousers. He glowers, the surliest socket sack this side of the great machine, hating her horrible, squared-off teeth and her blunt, stubby fingers. "Let's try this again, shall we?" Drawing 2 fractal knives from sheaths on her thighs, she makes a perfect Aurelis. Drawing two fractal knives from sheaths on her thighs, she makes a perfect Aurelis bow before him. Thunderstruck, he sits up straight, stares. "Not good?" she asks, and tries again. Furious confusion takes him. This is some kind of trick. Blasphemous mockery. "Irsevex," he rumbles. She shakes her head. "Nama." Sheathing one of her knives, she holds out her free hand with her fingers spread in supplication. He draws his chin toward his throat with this fresh betrayal, narrowing his secondary eyes. It speaks. Slowly, without breaking eye contact, she lays her other knife on the ground between them. The blade points towards her boots. He watches her every movement. How many secrets have the flesh lovers betrayed? That this creature can make peace like a cringing Drek before his kell. She taps 2 fingers against her cuirass. "Sejur," she says slowly. Then she points at him. Honor-bound even as he simmers in scandal, he replies, "Misrax, Vlask, Siurix." "Mithrax," she repeats, then grins. "Vlask, Mithrax. And welcome. Let's have a look about, shall we?" "Lord of Wolves, by this right alone do I rule." "Why did they call themselves wolves?" the hunter asks. "You guys don't have any wolves on your homeworld, do you?" "Nama," the captain replies. He has perched on a rusted-out skiff. He scans the horizon, trying to remember the way to the crypt. "So, why then? Most people haven't even seen one." "Yeah," the warlock chimes in. "I never even heard of wolves till I went to the Iron Temple." The captain cocks his head in a way that makes him look very like a squat, hulking owl. "Why Elixni accept name Fallen? Why wolves accept name wolves? Why Misrax is now?" He grimaces as he mimes their accents, showing his serrated teeth. "Mifrax?" He rises in one fluid motion and stands at his full height. "Why speak Guardian way instead Elixni? Dock things do not word themselves." He hops down, brushing past the hunter and the warlock with the rippling strength of a hunting tiger. "House of Wolves. They've been Mraskelassen. Gentle weavers. Come, I know the way now." The Queenbreaker. Despite the breaker's treachery, Her Majesty still stands. 3 cloaked figures trek through a cave on a windswept asteroid. As they walk, they joke. They tell stories. They are a fire team. "After Sybil," the warlock says, "the wolves bowed. Some became the queen's bodyguards. Then, Skolas." Whoa. How? Why? The hunter frowns. Why trust enemies with your life? A pause. No offense, buddy. The captain shrugs. None taken. Strange to do, but Elixni, we've been breathed always love for honor. New promise, not unmaken old. Wolves would been followed Marakel forever if Skolas does not appear again. The passage widens, and they find a hidden door veneered with amethyst. The captain lays a hand on it, bows his head. The hunter and the warlock fall back respectfully. After a time, the warlock ventures. Mithrax? The captain turns. Wolves rebel. Now, wolves extinct. This where live, mind things scatter must end. I will kill the mind open Elixni. No spider tricks. No loyal lies. Veresis, truth. We fight for great machine together. Chapter 9. Succession. I assure you, what you are hearing of me are lies. Varix the Loyal. Varix the Loyal remembers an ancient time and an ancient name. The House of Judgment, when grudges and status fights were worked out in a safe place, when the berserk and the vengeance crazed were kept somewhere harmless, and there were fewer rivals to plot around. The old fallen ways align perfectly with the Queen's agenda. With the House of Wolves in disarray, the Queen needs muscle in the reef. Guardians go where the treasure and the glory are, and an arena of champions is a wonderful place to earn both. Guardians in the reef deter threats to the Queen and give the Awoken a chance to learn about their power and subvert their loyalty to the traveler. And if, as the Queen worries, the 9 are scheming against her, then she needs a good excuse to clear out some of the most dangerous prizes in the Prison of Elders. And the Prison of Elders is full of dangerous prizes. The Awoken have captured titanically dangerous specimens from everywhere in the inner solar system. These monstrous champions want to smash Guardian Bone and Guardian Alloy, and given the chance, they'll kill Guardians, rend their ghosts, and snuff them out forever. Walk into the arena with a fire team you trust. And beware, the agents of the 9 are active in the reef, and their curiosity is as limitless as it is inscrutable. Risk death, win glory, and signs of Her Majesty's favor, but always remember that you are being watched and tested. Splinter of Bone. Deep in the heart of the Prison of Elders, Varix of House Judgment clutched a splinter of bone as he watched the solar system burn. The facility had been outfitted over the years with massive sensor grids slaved to arrays spread across the reef. They gave him a detailed analysis of the Red Legion's fury. The light from the monitors was the only illumination in the room as his arms flew across the controls. Relaying warnings to Petra and the Awoken, he could already see the remainder of the Awoken fleet disappearing off his scopes, going into hiding. Relaying warnings to the city, though he could see he was far too late. Their comms were gone. There was no one left to listen. Relaying warnings to his people. With the end of the houses, there were so few who would listen, but if he could save even a handful. While his hands worked, his eyes remained fixed on the screens, watching death, destruction, and horror. In his role working with the Guardians of the City, he'd pored over the distress signals from the Dantalian Exodus 6. Source Greenraven had sent bursts of analysis to the tower at least a dozen times since the days of the Taken War. But he never expected numbers of this magnitude. With the systems of the last city offline, he had no problem dialing sensors over the wall. He'd been able to see with clarity the home of humanity with a resolution where he could make out parks and lakes and marketplaces. These same sensors let him watch, grinding the bone in his mechanical fist, as people died, as the great machine was yoked, as the Guardians fell. Scrambling, he alerted the crows, but something went wrong. The network had fallen dark, each and every crow offline. All, that is, save for one. Through a garbled image, he saw a hand an awoken hand, but it almost immediately fell to static. He wanted to care. He wanted to feel something for them. What dominated his thoughts, though, what made a ticking noise emanate deep in his voice synth, was the growing fear that the Queen's plan had failed. He sat back in his chair, thinking. The prison of elders orbited far enough away from the core-awoken outposts, and thus far enough away from the Cabal's failings, that it might come out of this unscathed. Nonetheless, he initiated lockdown procedures, prepared for the worst. A comping. Confirmation. Petra Venge and the limited forces at her command evacuated what settlements they could and disappeared into the nooks and crannies of the reef. She would be unable to send help to the prison. First House Judgment, then House Wolves, then Kel Mara Sov. Now he would feel the rest of his adopted people slipping away from him. With one of his mechanical arms, he crushed the splinter of bone to dust. Less is more. Varix watched Petra's corsairs march their latest prize into the cell block, a gaggle of either starved dregs bearing the mark of the scorned barons. Nearby, Petra drummed her fingers along the hilt of her knife. Her eyes glinted with envy. She held onto the prison as if it was the last thing she could control. Perhaps it was. Between the scattered remnants of the Red Legion and the scorned barons running rampant through the reef, the Awoken had little left to call her own. Varric sighed. Only a true Kel understood that survival was not a game of waiting, and Petra Venge, for all her military prowess, was no Kel. In a world without Kels, Drake's strength will breed nothing but chaos. Varix whispered to himself, the old Rain proverb, wishing for the return of the decisive days of his queen, his Kel. What did you say? Petra asked without looking at him. Chaos, he replied. These dregs breed chaos. Petra scoffed. They're fallen, and where there's fallen, there will inevitably be guardians. She turned on her heel and walked away. I leave you to your judgment, Varix. Locate the hole in which these scorned barons cower. She stopped, turned back to him. Might want to go up your rations. You're looking a bit gaunt. She smiled, patted him on the back, and continued on her way. He watched her go. If his anatomy allowed for it, he would have smiled in kind. Hers was a heart always in the right place, even if the outcome of her decisions was less than ideal. She did not, however, fully appreciate the threat these scorned barons posed. He had tried to warn her when they were just 7 dregs and a heretical archon. Now their terror was spreading throughout the reef, with more and more fallen answering the barons' anarchistic call. She was right about one thing, though. He could stand to increase his intake. The thought of it made Varix thirsty for the flow. Like all of his kind since the appearance of the Red Legion, he had been forced to ration his intake. He never felt so weak, so close to death. But he would survive, as he always had. Varix knew the time would inevitably come when he would have to survive on his own. Roll call. After the Taken War, the scorned barons banded together in a time of weakness to become strong, to prey on anyone and anything that practiced the old Elixni ways. They began with the one thing their people needed to survive: either. In a way, the barons had become heads of a new house, priests in their own rights and arbiters of their own trials. The terror they unleashed had almost grown as powerful as any Kel. These heathens were not Elixni. They were more fallen than any of their brethren. They were everything judgment had sought to purge before the whirlwind, and now they sat rotting deep in the prison of elders. Cade and his 6 had done good by their word. Varix's staff tapped lightly on the floor plates, and chuckling noises emanated from his throat. He hobbled past their cells as the servitors hummed to life. Feeding time. He saw hatred in every cell he passed. Bathed in the light of the flowing ether, their eyes carved at his flesh, saw him docked 1,000 times more. Yavix, the rider, the untamed. She and her crew spread terror and disease with their noxious spikes. She and her crew spread terror and disease with their noxious pikes. Elicris, the machinist. She used stolen Cabal telemetry and gravity traps to sabotage vessels, relieve them of their cargo, and haul the hulks back to their own shipyard chop shops. Pura, the blind, the ghost of Hellrise Canyon, who haunted the Baron's territory with phantom decoys and ended all trespassers from the shadows. Rexus Vaughn, the Godslayer, the hangman. He had secreted away the ether stores of his victims and driven the barons and their followers into a frenzy with that tainted feast. Araxis, the wit, the traitor, the trickster, a mastermind, a liar, thief, and backstabber. Canix Twofinger, the mad bomber. The dangers of the reef had multiplied 100-fold, with his mines hidden on every rock and dusty corner of the belt. And the most disgusting of them all, Hurax, the mind-bender. This one found in the hive a way to infect the minds of the Elixni. Only one was missing. Fickrel, the heretic, the fanatic. One Varix once dared to call friend, back when the Archon tended to Calyx Prime. Before his betrayal, he hoped the fanatic was dead. Cade assured that he was. And what was Cade 6 if not reliable? Laughing, burbling to himself, Varric shut off the lights in the hallway, and the barons were plunged once again into darkness. Job undone. In the prison of Elder's security hub, Varix brooded. When the great machine woke, he had been sure he felt something deep within him stir. He had hoped it would give him answers, power, anything. All it did was remind him how far he had fallen. He slammed a fist on his console, watching the denizens of the prison claw at their cell walls. No, not nothing. Worse than nothing. Now he had doubt. His goal had always ever been a simple one. The banner of House Judgment, the calling to which he had been born, keep his people together. With the light now streaming across the system and nothing to show for it, no queen, no Eris or Osiris, and no sign the great machine remembered the Elixni, what was there to look forward to? Base survival. One day after the other, living just because he still drew breath. And where was the Dreg's strength in that? What was the... Varix. Petra burst through the comms. A Legion harvester has been intercepted at bearing 189. Capture teams are inbound. Survivors for the arena. Prepare to receive. Petravenge was all that was left for him there, and despite himself, he nodded at the sound of her voice. He had but one ally left, after all. He keyed the comms. Yes, yes, yes. Bay 41. Bring them in. We'll meet team. We'll make room for new... guests. His vocal synth burbled, needing tuning. Copy that. She was gone. He picked up his staff from where it leaned against the wall and began the long walk to the bay, mulling his options, his informations, his secrets. Secrets had protected the House of Judgment. The more knowledge one could obfuscate, the more significant one became. Secrets bred possibility. Secrets bred sway. But judgment, true judgment, required hierarchy. An Elixni hierarchy died with the fall of the houses. The Guardians had picked them apart, Kell by Kell, Prime by Prime. Now, there was all but nothing left of his culture. Only pirates and scavengers and lone wolves like the days before the Edge Wars. No trust, no honor, no way to be necessary. Yet one final hope among the Elixni still thrived. Krask, Kell of Kings. The kings understood judgment, for together they ended the Edge Wars in their people's golden age. Krask, his last hope to see his dreams of a united Elixni made manifest. He must make contact. And so he hired a bounty hunter named Grox to find Krask and remind them of their need for one another. Grox is emblematic of all that Varix despises in his people, gluttonous, proud, and in it only for himself. When they spoke, Grox made Varix pay with a litany of insults. Varix the slip, Varix the beggar, Varix the kell maker. But it was all for show. Grox would work, and it came for a mere 4 bales of etheric helix and a promise to keep him free of the prison of elders. The deal struck, Grox burst out in hysterical laughter. Huh! Consider job done, slip. Grox spoke in a low form of Elixni, the only reason Varix employed him. You have gone desperate with your kell gone, have you not? Varix sighed. King Kell is gone, Kellmaker. Dead at the hands of that insane Archon, Fikrul, and some awoken vagabond he calls Father. What remains of the kings huddles now in the dead zones of Earth, under the shadow of the great machine's shard. I expect my 4 bales and... Varix killed the feed. The last link in the great Elixni chain was broken. If there were any who called themselves Kell out there, they would not know Varix, judgment, or the laws that govern the houses. The scattered children of the whirlwind were dead. But Fikrul survived Cade and his 6? Grox was a lot of things, but he was not a liar. If Fikrul was alive and strong enough to kill Krask, and who was this awoken vagabond of which Grox spoke? His mind reeled. So long as Fikrul lived, the reef was not safe. He scrambled through his comm channels, searching for the right connection. Master Cade, Varix requests to meet you regarding your deal with Petra. A job undone. Some kind of luck. Varix hid beneath a bannerless cloak as he descended into Spider's lair, to where the judgment sigil in the tangled shore would be to invite death. Even with the Spider's blessing to pass, he would have been picked clean and docked 2 times over. The hedonistic sounds of Spider's palace scraped against him. Shouts of victory and defeat reminded Varix of the worst of the Elixni, his people's inherent need for superiority, reduced to gambling for trinkets and gems. Varix searched the crowd, hunched down low. Just another vandal. In the corner, the unmistakable crowd that surrounded the Hunter Vanguard when he was outside the city. He worked his way through the onlookers to take up position alongside Cade. The Hunter noticed him, he was sure, but said nothing. Varix, for his part, was silent, watched as he lost a few thousand glimmer and a sidearm to one of Spider's bodyguards. Cade spun a knife in his right hand and sighed dramatically. If we're going to talk, you're going to buy me a drink. They found a quiet place at the end of the room. Cade settled back in the booth, waiting. You do great service to Reef, yes? Varix worked hard to keep his very recognizable voice down. It would be a shame for his vocal synth to malfunction and blare out across the room now. Capture barons, criminals, for Awoken, for Petra. Cade took a belt and set the glass down on the table, empty. Something hard around his eyes. Amazing how expressive exos could be. Get to the point, Varix. Fikrul, the last scorned baron. He lives. Cade's horn cut an arc through the air as he shook his head, twice, definitive. Trust me, he's dead. Put a hot one right through here. He poked Varix right in the center of his chest. Seen on Earth, I have knowledge. I have information. You know Elixni have ways. Like Mithrax. Like Taniks. The warden realized his error as soon as the name was out of his mouth. Don't you ever mention the name Taniks around me. Got it? Not unless you want to lose your last 2 real arms. We're done. Get. Your bad luck. The hunter stood, made to leave. Varix reached out and grabbed the Vanguard by the arm with one of his mechanic hands. I am sorry. I spoke poorly. Please, listen. Cade shrugged off the arm and stood, towering over the fallen for once. Varix sat up straighter in the booth. Take me to Zavala. The Titan Vanguard's name was a punctuated, flowing stutter in his mouth. I have information. He will like what I say. You for bringing me to him. Cade blinked. You want me to take you to the city? No way, Bug. Not in a million. With a thud, Varix dropped the hand cannon he'd been hiding in his cloak on the table. A dull brown, bristles out the top, Ethertech, trigger, and muzzle assembly. Cade's eyebrows went up in surprise. A gift of trust. Memento of the wreath. Upgraded. Yes? Very deadly. The Hunter Vanguard tried to hide his excitement. Is that the last one? I haven't seen one of those in... One of the last. Not many left. Varix's voice was even, calm. Cade snatched the weapon from the table, checked the sights, spun it in his hand for a moment, feeling the weight. Grunted, satisfied. Nodded. Like I said, bad luck. Come on. You can ride with me. Overestimation. Varix had never seen the Vanguard commander in person before. The images he'd seen were either candid shots from agents or images from co-opted surveillance that didn't reveal the man's true stature. Most of Zavala's bulk, he realized, was the armor. He was a lean man, in reality, taut muscle and sinew. But as Varix stood before him, he realized Zavala's poise and confidence, along with his light, controlled the space around him. Lent him an air of authority Varix had not felt since standing in the presence of Marasov herself. Even Cade, of all people, seemed somehow different in the orbit of this man. Fascinating. Behind the light and the poise, Varix could see where the great Zavala's strength ended and anxiety began. That was where Varix needed to meet him and prove his worth. Vanguard Commander Zavala. Varix dropped to his knees and extended his hands, palms up on the ground, sure to keep eye contact. A judgment gesture meant to acknowledge that a dominant force was present. Cade snickered behind him, but said nothing. Varix came to offer assistance, to help the Vanguard, the Guardians, who have helped the Reef. Zavala stared Varix down. The judgment scribe saw much in that moment. Fortitude, intensity, desperation. On your feet, Varix. Zavala was quite used to giving commands and having them followed. Varix did as he was commanded. What do you want? A future for the Reef. Zavala's eyes were searching. Varix croaked and continued. Reefborn are close to doom. Zavala the Awoken. Fallen, taken, Red Legion, all carve at the Reef. All claim its flesh. I made my offer to Petra after the war. His voice was gruff, but not uncaring. She made her choice. Are you saying something has changed? I say this, Commander, Varix burbled, and I have so much more to say to a true leader, such as you. Unknown space. The light seemed to dance in blue over the horizon of unknown space, but all else was black. Tendrils seemed to grow with the light, where they were reaching from or stretching toward, he could not comprehend. Fear gripped Varix's mind. The paths before him were vast, uncertain, and for the first time in his life, he could sense judgment turned inward. Your will must remain your own, he told himself. You are the last elixir of House Judgment. The destiny of your people is in your hands. You will save them. You will stand for the fallen. You walk among them because you have failed. The voice, soft and yet so strong, echoed around him in the space, through him, like he was a string on an instrument. I walk among the children of Earth and the blessed of the great machine, the one they call Traveler, because they have been chosen. For you, the great machine is a dark mirror. Varix felt cold, unlike he had ever known. Unbidden, memories rushed past him. All he could do was hang on as the last days of the Elixni played out in his mind. He and his fellow scribes passing judgment in their soft, furred robes. Then the whirlwind, the elders torn apart, the pillaging of the house. Varix kneeling before a window, staring up at the great machine, watching it vanish. The long journey in the darkness. His flight to run with the wolves, his pleas to Skolas, the pact with Fikrul to sever Calyx Prime and secret it away, the Prime vanishing, and again Fikrul on the horizon, preparing to give the fallen what they so rightfully deserve. There is only one path left for you here, in a place where everything dies and begins anew. With that, a new power burned, affording him the strength to rise again. Judgment cast. The screaming pulse of the prison alarm stirred Varix awake. On the comms, he heard Petra's voice. Cade had returned. 2 cells. Petra called for not 1, but 2 cells. Varix finished his ether, considering. Perhaps Cade had finally found Fikrul, and for that, Varix would need every drop of strength he could muster. His strides were long and slow as he allowed the ether to course through him, his posture growing taller and more commanding with each step. At the top of the max sec wing, his hands flew over the controls. He prepared the 2 empty cells and ordered extraction servitors into place, all the while reveling in the thought of the judgment of Fikrul. Finished, he stepped back and waited. Snarling, yelling, the prisoners entered the wing. 1, an Elixni. Petra shoved hard into one of the 2 cryocells. The fallen landed, weak, and Petra sealed the cell door. Varix was all too pleased to see the hulking, disgraced Fikrul, the lifeline of the scorned barons, his once trusted co-conspirator and great betrayer, seething as the extraction servitors whirred to life, sapping the heretical archon of his precious ether. Varix and Fikrul looked deep into one another's eyes, centuries of history passing between them in the space of a heartbeat. Fikrul laughed. Unnerved, Varix stepped away as Cade dragged a ragged, humanoid figure, head bagged, face unseen. Cade unceremoniously tore off the hood and tossed the humanoid, an awoken man, into the open cell. "And stay there," Cade said. His joke fell flat. On hands and knees, the stranger looked up at his captors to reveal a familiar mess of crow-black hair, blue skin, and piercing yellow eyes. Varix. It was the face of Uldren Sov, brother to the queen, prince of the Awoken, and heir to the Reef. Reacquaintance. Your Grace. Varix couldn't help but use the title, like a reflex. As he looked into the prince's eyes, he saw a fleeting shadow of darkness dance across their normal, ethereal, golden glow. Varix looked back to Petra. Petra Venge, I do not understand. I know. Something's wrong with him, Varix. He's mad. Lock him down. Lock down the entire cell block. No one in but you or me. Speak of this to no one. As far as the system is concerned, Uldren Sov died over Saturn. Varix looked to Cade for answers, but the Exo just threw up his hands in defense. Don't look at me. Prince Whinyface and Fikrul were thick as thieves when we found them. Took all I had in me not to shoot the both of them. Petra nodded toward the now royal cell, and Varix, with only a hint of hesitation, sealed the hatch, locking Prince Uldren in. Now, Varix, Cade said, smooth as ever. You let me know if Fikrul here ever comes up to the arena. He and I have a conversation to finish. Of course. Of course. Varix noticed Petra's gaze lingered a little too long on the prince's cell. He could see she was troubled, even ashamed. Petra saw him watching and composed herself, back straight, all wrath. She met his eyes. He could still see her trouble, her shame. Varix, my friend. Was that tenderness Varix heard in Petra's voice? He's changed. His eyes. She stopped herself. Reset. If he speaks, don't listen. He speaks lies. Terrible lies. And with that, she walked away. Cade close behind. The doors to the cell blocks slammed shut behind them. Varix stood there for a long, long time. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what the next step should be. Petra Venge and Uldren Sov had long admired one another. There was an easiness about them when they were together, and a deep, if unspoken, affection. When the two of them joined forces in the field of battle, they were quick, effective, and dangerous. Theirs was a dance of death, and woe to the foe who met them in open combat. Varix wondered for what crimes Petra would have Uldren judged. As he reopened the prince's cell, he wondered if Petra would have Varix himself judged. Varix knelt before Uldren. We thought you dead. But you are in my care now, yes? His arms carefully brushed at the awoken man, probing but gentle. Uldren blinked and looked toward him. Or rather, his golden eyes looked beyond him. Varix looked over his shoulder, just to check. Of course, no one was there. Sister, Uldren croaked through dried, cracked lips. What's to become of us now? Revolution. The explosion of servitors snapped Varix away from the pool of the prince's words. He tried to move quickly, but one of his toes caught awkwardly on the grated catwalk, and he stumbled to the floor. He lifted his head to see the extraction servitors lying shattered and lifeless, hissing as ether evaporate wafted into the air. Varix rose, moving cautiously, slowly, uncertain who or what might be loose. He checked every seal of Fikrul's cell, then gathered enough courage to peer into the porthole. Fikrul was unaffected. If anything, he looked stronger than he did before. He stood there, glaring, a devilish grin plastered across his face. Does it find my ether bitter? He growled. Indeed, Varix could see that something was wrong with his ether. It was darker, tainted with something he could not identify. He tightened the seals of his mask as he examined the servitor's remains, fearing whatever they pulled from Fikrul could be toxic. He moved through the fog-like gas as if it was water. It didn't dissipate like traditional ether. It lingered, heavy and opaque. Varix stepped back up to Fikrul's cell, activated the transmission mic. Fikrul, asachli, akisorix, he seethed, using the high speak of judgment, hoping that Fikrul might still respect the oldest law. Varix, you cling to judgment like rain clungs to lies. Like rain clung to lies. Fikrul spat his words the way the houseless would. You are houseless. You are filth. Is this what you've done with Calyx? Served the last prime to the taken? Is that the blood you now breathe? Huh! You still believe I have Calyx? Fool. Calyx abandoned us, but my ether. It's true Fikrul is no longer enslaved to the machines either. By the grace of the awoken father, I have evolved. Varix looked back to the prince's cell, still open. The awoken father. Varix ambled back to the prince. With each step, he heard more clearly. He saw Uldren sitting up now, nodding, listening, peering into the shadows at something unseen. If ever there was a picture of malevolent insanity, this was it. The prince spoke. Yes, sister, I see it now. The army of the reviled that you promised me. The spark. Varix, ever the loyal, did as Petra commanded. Access to the lowest cell block was reserved strictly to the warden and the regent commander. Unfortunately, this meant that every menial operational task was left to him. Meal distribution, waste disposal. Between the 8 barons and the awoken prince, his new choice left him little time for judgment. Thrice per day he visited the block, and thrice per day he had to manufacture excuses to the local corsair detachment for why the lowest level of the prison was now off limits. Rumors swirled. It was not unknown that Petra and Cade Six had smuggled some unknown high-value prisoner, a humanoid prisoner no less. A first for the prison of elders, if the rumors were true. But Varix assured anyone with the gumption to ask that his judgment of the scorned barons was a sensitive process to be conducted in private. Petra herself did not help extinguish the scuttle. She was less than adept at the art of secrecy, and everyone knew it. She responded to any bold queries with a stern, "It is none of your concern," which itself was tantamount to a validation that some version of the rumors was true. If only she'd found joy in her Techian training. If only she'd learned more from the queen. Each time Varix performed his rounds, he asked himself what loyalty, if any, he owed to the prince. And each time he stopped short when he bore witness to the prince's ramblings. Today was no different. There Uldren sat, elbows atop knees, staring into the same dark corner of the cell, face concealed by his long black hair, seemingly communing with nothing. I see now. Yes, that's good. So good. More listening. More nodding. Then that's what we shall do. And look, sister, he is already here. Uldren fell into silence, visibly relaxing. After a moment, he looked back over his shoulder and through the porthole to meet Varix's eyes. Your Grace, Varix burbled. Varix the Loyal, Uldren smirked. Varix the Spark. Did you have something to say to me, or are you content to play the spying crow? And there it was again, that fleeting pass of inky darkness that momentarily snuffs the glow of Uldren's eyes. So Varix said nothing. Whether frozen in terror, or simply at a loss for words, he could not say. Uldren leaned in, placed a finger against his lips, and spoke low. I have a secret for you, Varix. I know you want to hear it. Varix answered with a single drawn-out and ever so slight nod. Your Kell lives, Uldren whispered. He leaned in a little closer and asked the one question Varix had never been able to answer. Do you know where your true loyalty lies, Varix? Uldren didn't wait for a response. His eyes almost immediately darted over his shoulder, toward the shadowy corner that has become his obsession. Of course we can trust him, dear sister. He is the most loyal. Chain of Souls. Varix admired his masterpiece, the improvised servitor chain that would finally reveal the secrets of his fanatical former friend. Unfortunately, Fikral refused talk of the past, would speak only of the future, or of Uldren, his awoken father, who snatched him from the edge of death and awakened within him a power never before seen in the Elixni. A power over death itself, a power to remake their people and thrive in a universe of light and dark that had both forsaken them and left them scorned. Varix knew these feelings all too well. It was here, in the deepest catacombs of the prison of elders, where he thrived, where he worked to rebuild the Elixni. This was his home now. this workplace where he was free to explore the potential of the prison's inmates for future leverage. The emerald marrow worm food of the hive, the prismatic viruses of the Vex, scion flare, wavelengths. Each of these secrets had been wrested free within these dank halls, traded among his networks for more secrets, or harnessed into weapons for the awoken. But the secrets of Ficrel's mutation eluded him. The power within was obvious. Scattered about the floor was the evidence of its potency, as well as too many nights of failure. Wrecked sentry servitors, dozens of deflated dregs, all pulled from the upper cell blocks to act as his assistants. Whatever this cold, unnatural cocktail was that coursed through Ficrel, it could not be transferred or ingested like the ether his people needed to sustain their wretched lives. Varix was all too ready to give up, send Ficrel into the arena to face Cade 6, and put an end to the legacy of the scorned barons. Until one day, during Varix's rounds, Uldren spoke to him unprompted. There was a lucidity in the discarded prince's eyes, a clarity that didn't exist even before he disappeared over Saturn's rings. Uldren gave Varix a fresh perspective. And so, the chain. It was a dangerous gamble, mingling Ficrel's polluted lifeblood with traditional ether. These servitors held 70% of Varix's own ether reserves. If this failed, well, it wouldn't be the first time Varix had risked everything and lost. Varix pulled the lever. The hum of the servitor chain crescendoed, but all he heard was the lingering echo of Uldren's poisonous question. Do you know where your true loyalty lies, Varix? But if it worked, perhaps Ficrel could be cured. Perhaps, if what Varix suspected was true, and Ficrel's corruption was related to the prince's affliction, Uldren could be cured too. Varix had said as much to Petra, but she'd refused to listen. You will not experiment on the prince. Our prince is ill. To keep him here, hide him from awoken eyes. Not right. Not right. I've made my decision, Varix. Varix's fingers flexed. Petra, the loyal, he sneered. Perhaps the murmur of Kamala Ryer are true. Yes? Petra glowered. I will handle Uldren. You will not touch him. She turned sharply on her heel and strode out. Varix hadn't seen her since. He devoted all his time to the servitor chain and to his private thoughts. Where loyalty lies. Varix's experiment succeeded, but not how he expected. Ingestion of the etheric concoction still resulted in fallen death. It was not, by any means, a life-sustaining substance. It was, however, a life-giving substance. Though the dark ether lingered like a heavy fog, it also seemed to reach out toward empty vessels. In this case, it found the dead dregs that littered his floor. It slipped inside the corpses like a slow inhalation, inflating them, stretching them to the point of boils and bursting, pulling them to their feet. The dark ether gave these lifeless dregs new life. They seethed. Their breathing was steady, but hard and fast. They rumbled as if volcanoes lived inside their chests. A black fire rose from their skin as they burned this dark ether like a jet engine burns its fuel. What Varix really saw before him was hate-fueled rage incarnate and the beginning of another whirlwind. They were no longer just fallen. Ficrel called them his scorn. Behind him, Ficrel laughed and laughed and laughed until he abruptly stopped. At that exact moment, the scorn dropped to the floor, dead once more. Your scribes, your kells, your houses, they will all soon be forgotten, like the elders and the scathe before them. Fequel growled in Varix's precious high speak of judgment. This drew Varix closer, face to face through the cell's porthole. Fequel turned his ear upward, listening, brought his attention back to Varix. Father says. The pause hung heavy in the air. Father says, you know where your true loyalty lies. The fanatic stepped back from the porthole and waited. Loyalty. True loyalty. He expected a memory of Mara to appear in his mind, but instead he found himself thinking about the prophecies of House Rain, Kell of Kells. Days later, Varix performed his duties for the last time. He visited Central Control, ran a test sim on the security systems, made some adjustments based on the results, revised and signed off on the daily roster rotations. Finally, he had a private conversation with the prison's sole remaining high servitor. The prison of elders would not go without a warden. He did not speak to Petra. By the end of that day, the prison of elders descended into chaos. Your time will come, Varix. Uldren sits in his favorite spot, gazing in his favorite direction. She told me so. She has but one last wish of you. No, Your Grace. Varix's voice was gravelly with emotion. It is I who has one last service for you. Varix left before he could change his mind. A klaxon blared. The voice of the prison's high servitor echoed over the loudspeakers. In Varix's voice. Security systems malfunction. Emergency shutdown and reboot commencing. The place dropped momentarily into darkness, but emergency lighting quickly illuminated the cell block. All around him, alarms sounded. Warning lights flashed, pneumatics hissed, and cryogenic fuels evaporated to fog as the cryocells lining the cell block began to open. Varix moved as quickly as he could toward the exit, not bothering to look back, for he knew what he'd see. The scorned barons and Prince Uldren were free, as was every single resident of the prison of elders. Varix slipped out under cover of prison anarchy through the same secret passage in which Petra and Cade had smuggled Prince Uldren. There, a ship waited, loaded with the prison's ether stores. As he walked, he made 2 recordings to be sent out by the prison's relays once he was away. For the first, he disabled his voice synth and began, in the deep resonance of high speak, to give commands. He didn't know how many would answer Judgment's call, but he had to try. For the second, he turned his voice synth back on. They call me betrayer, I who was most loyal. They do not think I hear the words. Bug. Insect. He paused. Fallen. Up, long strides, fast now, along the ramp into the ship, toward the bridge. A vandal in wolf colors saluted him as he passed. I hear the words. House of Judgment always hears. No choice. To keep the houses together. He paused again as he reached the bridge of his ship. Judgment always hears. The great machine stood in judgment. Elixni fell to fighting, fell to hate. Emotion caught in his voice. Cannot stomach this hate. As he spoke, the ship's engines rumbled to life. On the screens, Varix could see explosions resonating through the prison, his former charges running rampant. His ship passed through the bay's barrier and began to move off. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Here. He drew himself up to his full height. And so I become Varix, the Kell, House Judgment envoy to the Elixni people. No choice, he repeated, chuckling deep in his throat. His voice was calm. Elixni must rise. Yes?